Blessings, beautiful souls. This is Dr. Lori with Still Whole Wellness, trusting that you are well and at peace. I am so excited today because today is the first day of the reboot of the YouTube channel. So now we're going to be focusing all of our conversations specifically on survivors. We're going to be talking to beautiful souls that have walked this journey and are well on their way to healing. And so I'm so excited and just overjoyed to have my illustrious friend and colleague here with me today to help me with this reboot, Miss Gina Walton. And so let me just give you guys a little bit of her background. So Gina is the founder and the CEO of Divine Star Essentials LLC. She has earned her certificate in life coaching and is a master Reiki healer, which you guys know I totally vibe with. Uh, she is also a yoga and mindfulness instructor. She's currently just about done with receiving her master's degree in psychology from Grand Canyon University. She is a holistic coach, again, just speaks to my heart. And she's also a healer. She believes in manifesting and living a purpose-driven life by maintaining a holistic health lifestyle through social responsibility. Welcome and blessings to you, my dear friend. Thank you for being
Thank you
here.
for having me. Thank you
This
for
is like
having me.
this is the perfect way for me to reboot the channel, and refocusing things. I said, you know what, who would be the perfect person for this? And definitely you. So welcome.
Appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Welcome, welcome. So, as I was reading through, I'm like so excited. I don't even know like where I want to start. Um, but I know as I was reading through your bio, I was learning so much about you, and we've known each other for a little over a year now. But in reading your bio, I was learning even more about you that I had no idea about. And you wrote something there where you said that you were lost without an anchor. And you mentioned how using holistic modalities has kind of helped you to re-anchor yourself and refocus yourself. I was hoping that you'd be willing to share with the viewers a little bit more about your journey.
Absolutely. Um, as you know, I lost my mom in 2015,
Mhm.
and just a whole lot of different traumas that I've experienced throughout life. And it wasn't until I started my tenure at Fayetteville State University with my undergrad, and I was just kind of focus driven in school. All I was doing was school, 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 and I would stay up around the clock from sunup to sundown, and I would literally just close my computer, take a shower, and get up and go to school. No sleep, no nothing. I think for the first two semesters, I was a 4.0 student.
Wow.
And one day, my business mentor, he pulled me into his office and he said, "I want to talk to you for a minute." And he was like, "Are you okay?" And I was looking at him like, "Yeah, why? Why are you asking me something crazy like that?" He said, "Because," he said, "I was you." And so immediately I got butterflies and I'm like, what is he talking about? Like,
Mhm.
okay, am I wearing my emotions on my sleeve? Because I tried the first thing that I learned in healing is that before we're ready to heal, we always think we have it together. We think no one can see our scars, no one's
Mm.
going through life, and that's how I like to present professional, just well put together, the things that you don't want people to see, you tend to hide those.
Mhm.
And he said, often what we say, this is a safe place and
Mhm.
I just need to know where your head is at. And so we begin to talk. And he said, Gina, you got to find your anchor. And it was in that moment that I realized that I was completely out of control, meaning emotionally, not really physically, but just emotionally. I was just kind of floating through life. I didn't really have a purpose. I was doing things out of routine. And in that moment, I didn't know how to do that. And it probably wasn't until that was probably my last semester. Yeah, it was my last semester at Fayetteville State.
Mhm.
And it wasn't until 6 months later that I was introduced to a local healer in the community. and received my first Reiki treatment.
Wow.
And I remember going in there, like this ain't finna work, I thought it was a joke.
Mm-hmm.
And when she said that she felt a blockage in my heart center and in my sacral, and I'm still just laying there like, okay,
What is
and
this?
she said, yeah, exactly. And she started telling me to close my eyes and take a deep breath. And that was the first time that I experienced the connection of what we call life force energy. I
Mm-hmm.
actually felt it. I'd
Mm-hmm.
never felt anything like that in my life. And I remember sitting there like, oh my gosh, all this stuff that everybody talks about, it's real,
Mm-hmm.
and I was like, I didn't know who to talk to about it. I didn't know who to tell. And that was the beginning of my journey. She did a reading for me, and she did my first Reiki treatment, and the rest is history.
Isn't it beautiful how as soon as you are in need of the healing, or when you become aware that, okay, yeah, maybe I probably need some help, then it just miraculously just kind of falls in your lap. I always am like amazed by that. It was much of the same for myself, where I was kind of starting the journey, but really kind of scared and didn't really know what to do and what it was that I needed. But I knew that I needed something. I was
Exactly.
in therapy and I knew that therapy wasn't fully working.
Working.
And it was just like out of nowhere. Like I get this inbox from this lady, and she was a spiritual healer. And so it began. So it began. So I think that that's beautiful. And I think that's one of the beautiful commonalities that we have in our stories. And so I'm just so glad to know that. Um, so you mentioned about your mom passing away, and I know, we're friends, so I kind of know your story a bit. And you have been very open and have shared very bravely, might I add, have shared and disclosed about the sexual assault trauma in your history. And you've even shared about the responses that you received from your dear mom. Would you like to elaborate on some of that?
There was an incident. She wasn't a part of the family meeting. The one thing that really sticks out for me, there was a mom story, and then there was one on a broader spectrum.
Okay. You can
The
share
first
whichever
time,
you feel comfortable with.
sure.
It's fine.
No, the first time that my mom, that I think really kind of suspected that something may have been going on with me, um, she was really, I think she was afraid, and so she was really dismissive. I
Mm-hmm.
remember coming home, and I actually had a hickey on my breast area,
Mm-hmm.
and she kind of side eyed me, and I could tell that she was kind of gathering her thoughts, but I'm like 8. And she kind of said, "Well, what's that?" And I remember immediately freezing and looking at her like I can't tell her what really happened. And I told her I ran into a door.
Mm-hmm.
And she went with it. And I think that was just her way of coping. We never talked about it, we never revisited. She just looked at me and said, "Well, you need to be more careful." And I said, "Okay." And that was the end of that one.
Mm-hmm.
And for another time, I was a little more younger, maybe seven, six,
Okay.
7, somewhere in that era. And I remember playing with some family members. The family gatherings, all the kids are together,
Mm-hmm.
things getting out of hand, hormones, you know,
Mm-hmm.
reenactment of grown people.
Mm-hmm.
And one of my family members went upstairs. They're downstairs being nasty. They doing, and we heard her upstairs, and we were like, oh God, so of course, the big family meeting, you have all the elders sitting at the table, and everybody's kind of gawking at each other. And in that moment, that situation was very traumatizing because it wasn't really from a place of what should have been healing. It was more accusatory and scolding,
Mm-hmm.
and who's down there doing that, and what are you doing? There was no separation of the girls from the boys. So, a lot of times in our community, I would say, we're forced to elaborate and come out and tell our stories in front of our abusers, or even if they don't know that what they're doing, because in this case we were all children.
Mhm.
Not taking accountability away, but children are naive. They're sponges. They're
Mhm.
robots, and in that moment it just was not a safe place. And so what did we all do? Of course we lied. We're looking at each other. Some of us are looking at each other like, you better not say nothing. And then the
Right.
other ones are like, oh my God, I'm just so paralyzed with fear. I'm just act like I don't know what's going on. And so that, for me, that was very traumatizing. And that is the first time that I learned to shut up
Mhm.
and keep stuff to myself.
Mhm.
And, it wasn't even from the place of being like terrified, but okay, you did something wrong. It's your fault. Nobody's going to believe you. You're going to get a whooping, so just shut up and keep
Mhm.
it moving. You're not dead. You're not hurt. Just keep it moving.
Mhm.
And it was never done again. It was never brought up. But as I got older, I started hearing similar stories. Even as an adult, I started hearing similar stories and, more vivid stories from different family members, close family friends.
Mhm.
And I'm just sitting there like, oh my God, like, why has nobody done anything? And it just began to kind of make sense on why people were the way they were, including my mother. It was never confirmed or denied, but I recall a lot of conversations that we had before she transitioned, and that came up. And because I hadn't started my journey yet, I was afraid to step in that water and say, Mom, are you fighting some trauma? Did somebody hurt you?
Mhm.
And so now in my healing, it's just like, geez, so much went unsaid
Mhm.
and went undone. And I've just decided, during my journey, that I don't want that anymore. That's
And do
not what I
you
want for myself.
I love that. I love that you have made I love your knowing that it's a decision. It's a decision.
Absolutely.
Very controversial perspective to have. There are some survivors that, feel like, this is just what it is. I have no choice in this. But I love your knowing, and we share that perspective that it is a decision to decide that, okay, this is not the energy that I want for my life anymore. And making that definitive choice to experience something different. I wanted to ask you, you mentioned, the family just kind of in their response, to all of this. Do you feel that that is something that is just a normal response from a family, or do you feel like that what had a cultural component to it?
I think it's 50-50.
Okay.
And the reason why I say that, being a mother now, when you get in certain positions, just being a parent, period, you can never be prepared for when your child or anybody, comes to you and says, hey, this is what's going on. And so I think all of it is a coping mechanism.
Mhm.
And when I say a cultural feat, the saying goes that black people don't go to therapy.
Mhm.
What happens in the family stays in the family. Everything is hush
Which
hush.
I feel that shifting. I feel that
it
changing.
It
Mhm.
absolutely is. It absolutely is, and I'm happy about that. But just in the time frame, from where my family trauma started, and my experiences.
Mhm.
Um, I would say that it is a cultural situation and a cultural response and coping. It's what's always been done. It's how things were handled. Generational things that have been passed down. So if it's worked this long, then why not? We ain't got to fix it. This is how it's been, and this is how we're gonna deal with this. You're gonna be okay. You're gonna go to school. You're gonna move. You're gonna do what you need to do, and we're just not gonna talk about it.
Yeah. And that it happens so often. I see that, as I coach clients daily. Especially those that are, within like our age group, 30s, 40s, that's what I see. where, if especially if you're in the African American community, where you're exactly right, you're told, we're just going to move on, we're not going to talk about this. Sometimes it's even said, this didn't happen to you, you misinterpreted it, you understood the perpetrator's actions. um, Pray about it,
That's the
talk to.
famous one.
That's the famous one, especially in our community. Pray about it, talk to the pastor about it, but it stays within the unit. And in some regard, I can understand it and even respect it, especially because, again, in our community, it's very well understood that we fear those in authority. So why would we want to take this sensitive information to someone who is seen in authority? We feel like, we're going to be exploited or something in some way. So I do understand that aspect of it. Um, but there's that healing piece that absolutely needs to be there. And you touched on something a moment ago when you mentioned your mom. Another commonality that you and I definitely share, where I have, as an adult, and I've really had to really work through this, and I think we've talked about this before, where I really had to work through the understanding that the reason why my mom couldn't be there for me in the way that I know that she wanted to. And it's not to say she wasn't there at all, but the way that she really wanted to stand in that space, she couldn't, because you can't give what you don't have. She
Absolutely.
couldn't help me to heal because there was so much of her own past that she had not yet dealt with. And it pains me, it pains my heart to know that our mothers left here quite possibly having not dealt with that,
Absolutely.
and having to leave here with that hurt. Very, very telling of the culture and of the era. I also think that it's very interesting, as I've done, my study and things like that on trauma and the physical, somatic effects of trauma. We find that things like breast cancer, things like heart attacks, um, things like heart aneurysms are generally the ways that people leave here should they not have dealt with their trauma. Your mom with cancer, my mom with the heart aneurysm. It becomes an issue of the heart, and when it's not dealt with and addressed appropriately, unfortunately, that is kind of the fate. Yeah. Yeah. So I think I asked, I don't know if I asked already, how would you have liked, in that situation, in that moment, with the situation with the family gathering and the elders being around the table, how would you have liked for them to have handled that situation? Like, if you could go back in time and like redo that, how would you have liked for them to have dealt with that?
I think now, knowing all the things that I know, but even not knowing those things, I think it's important that we realize when things of this nature occur that in that moment, the only response that should happen is love.
Mm,
Even before you have the opportunity to dig into the truth and start unpacking the situation, the
yes.
first response should always be love and
Yes.
gentleness. And in that moment, I think that would have been a teachable moment to, one, separate the males from the females and a time to teach. And as I reflect on something that you just said, honoring why our culture feels the need to keep certain things within family bonding
Hmm.
and healing spaces. What we do as holistic healers and practitioners, which is something that has been generational for us anyway. When we get back to our, ancestral healing,
Hmm.
um, that's already an honor that we do. And I
Hmm.
think it would have been an opportunity to utilize some of those tools in doing the inquiry stage and saying, how are you feeling? You
Mm-hmm.
know, what actually happened? Just using that space to step into our ancestral ways and how we've been brought up, through time,
Yeah.
and saying, what happened, this is the role that we play, as elders, and just making it a safer space for people to come out and tell their story, or even say, I'm not ready to talk about it yet,
Mm-hmm.
but yes, there is a problem and it didn't make me feel comfortable, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm okay, or I'm not okay. But just in creating that safe space, because
And I go, I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, holistic healing is about sacredness and
Yes.
holding that space. That is something that westernized medicine does not afford us, because westernized medicine wants us to put everything on Front Street. There's no sacredness about it. And the
Mm,
important thing about holistic healing is that it's about the individual and the practitioner, because that space builds trust and
yes.
it builds a safety net,
Mm,
where healing can take place. And, I would have liked to have seen more of that cultural history come
mhm.
out in that moment and be more of a teachable moment rather than creating more trauma.
Yes. That is so beautifully stated. Oh my gosh, that is beautifully stated. And you're absolutely right. Like in our in our history, the space was always created for us to heal, and if I dare be so bold to say that, in my opinion, it's religion that has gotten us away from those things. And I'm excited, as we sit here as two holistic practitioners, because it's a sign that we're bringing this healing space back to our culture, and we're reintroducing this way of living and this way of healing back to our people. And that excites me, like in a way you have no idea. It really does, because it is something that we have really gotten away from. And like I said, that space in our history has always been created. We were always intentional people to create the space to be able to heal. And we have gotten away from that. And we were told, you heal in church. You
Yes.
heal by going to a doctor. You heal by going to this therapist if your family is in that space. So this is beautiful to me. This is beautiful to be able to see people that look like us, sound like us, to be able to now create those spaces within our community, once again, for people to be able to do this healing work. Um, you mentioned something a moment ago about the conversation, you know, um, something that I've always really endeavored to do with my children was to have the conversation, like you said, leading with love, and creating that space of education, talking very openly, almost to the point of the children being almost uncomfortable, but talking very, very openly about, um, because there's like sibling incest and things like this. So having these conversations to make them aware, first of all, you're human.
Absolutely.
You're human. You're going to have these urges. You're going to have these feelings, and then teaching them and guiding them in the right way to handle such urges and feelings, and like I said, just having those conversations, albeit very uncomfortable for me as mom too, but I would feel more uncomfortable to know that my child has assaulted another child in that manner. So that's very important. And
Absolutely.
if you're watching this and if you're a parent and you're saying, hey, I don't know how to have that conversation with my child, here are two practitioners right here that would be more than willing to help guide you through having such a conversation with your children. So I wanted to move on, and I wanted to talk about You shared in the pre-interview a story that I definitely wanted, if you're still comfortable with sharing, I wanted to share the conversation we had about um, how you were perceived by others because you had been um, you were physically developed, and the assumptions that people kind of carried. Can you kind of elaborate on that and share your heart with that?
Absolutely. I recall I've always been very developed very early. And the assumption was made that I was fast. And I got in trouble for doing just basic little kid stuff. Why do you have on that shirt, or why do you have on those pair of pants, or why are you moving that way? And I'm like, my mama put me in this. This is what she set out for me to wear today. Like, what was I supposed to do? I'm a kid, and these are adults.
Mm-hmm.
I can recall grown men making passes at me, and feeling uncomfortable and almost embarrassed because I understood, what, the gestures and the snide remarks that were being made. And I remember one time being in church, and just for the sake of, you know, remaining, anonymous, I remember a family member approaching me and popping me in church because I was clapping.
Mm-hmm.
And to this individual, I was being seductive with, being top heavy.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember in that moment, I remember that day like it was yesterday. I was so excited to be back in church. This happened in my hometown. And I remember in that moment, I was just kind of stuck. And it bothered me. And I remember telling my aunt about the situation. And she did in that moment take the opportunity to tell me, why are you walking? Because she was asking me, why are you walking with your chest sucked in? And I told her, I didn't want to get in trouble for, and she was like, no, you don't walk like that. But it was, she was actually a part of that earlier group when I told you about the first incident, when the elders were at the table. So in that moment, I was confused.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, you're darn if you do, you're darn if you don't,
Mm-hmm.
and honestly, I've carried that with me um, through adolescence, through adulthood. It just, those early, those early family structures and ideas that people have about you, no matter how hard you try to shake those things in these type of situations, they stick
Yeah.
until you start your healing
Mm-hmm.
process. And that has been something that has stuck with me. I was a troubled teen, looking for love in all the wrong places. Um, still having that label of being fast,
Mm-hmm.
going through normal teen things. I'm looking at my peers going through the same exact thing. Like, just the other day, you just got done, but we having a meeting about what I'm doing. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's when your voice starts to diminish and you start getting, into those awkward stages. And that's when you start seeing those adolescents getting, labeled as, the difficult teens or the ones that are not responsive. And I fell into that category. And even in adulthood at 42, I haven't been able to shake that.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just now, like I said, starting my journey where those things are, I'm in my butterfly, my caterpillar stage where I'm
Mm-hmm.
starting to shed some of those those stigmas that have negatively affected me, even through, right now as we sit. I've shared with you some of my inability to use some of my healing modalities and why that's affected me. And it's just been recently, in I would say in the last 60 days, that I even really came into full awareness on why I haven't been able to use even some of the modalities that we speak of effectively.
Mm-hmm.
And this journey is just once you think you healed from one area, you realize you have yet still a lot more growing to do. But I just think it's really important to first acknowledge that you need to be healed.
Mm-hmm.
Because for a long time, I did not even acknowledge that. I was just surviving,
Mm-hmm.
floating through life without an anchor.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't really consider myself as a victim
Mm-hmm.
because you hear so many stories that are so much worse than yours. You have this societal view of what a victim or survivor looks like. And I just didn't put myself into that category.
Mm-hmm.
And so now,
Isn't it something how we we do that? I just had this a very similar conversation with some other colleagues where we were discussing the fact that as survivors we often do that, where we will look at someone else's story and look at someone else's pain and in some way measure it against ours, and although we know that it's a part of the healing process, it's a part of the journey, it's still just like it hurts my heart to know that, because the bottom line is your pain is your pain. I can't tell you that you shouldn't be hurt by something. If it hurt, it just doggone hurt. You know what I mean? So again, I realize that it's very much a part of the process, but it's still, it does bother me, because I'm like, you are entitled to say this hurt, regardless of whether or not it looks like my hurt or feels like my, like, I don't get to say that. I don't get to say that. So talk to us a little bit about these healing modalities that have been helpful to whatever degree.
for me, like I said, it started with Reiki.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I began, like I said, my journey about 3 going on 4 years now, with that first Reiki session that I had, and then I went back for another. And then my practitioner, she said, "Well, I do teach classes on this." I
Mm-hmm.
still wasn't completely sure. I just knew that I liked it. It was interesting to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I started, it was like going down a rabbit hole. You start researching chakras, and
Yes.
I was in a rabbit hole. I would find myself at 3 o'clock in the morning, just sitting in bed, just, reading and investigating. I was in awe. And I started using it, but I wasn't consistent. And so I got a little discouraged, and I was like, this is not working. Like, why am I still feeling like this?
Mm-hmm.
And let me just be clear, as a holistic practitioner, I 110% believe in my modalities. But if
Mm-hmm.
you need therapy, go get it. And you
Yeah.
just have to do your homework and find where you're comfortable, where the safe space is for you. I will never tell someone that needs therapy not to go get it, because
Mm-hmm.
it is helpful and it's been a part of my healing process in conjunction with my holistic method. Journaling. Journaling has been very therapeutic. That has actually been one of the ones that I struggle with. And I realize that it's rooted in some of my trauma, but I just keep going. I just chip away at it. Anytime I feel like it, I just, I might write a little bit here, I write a little bit there, but it gives you your voice back, your throat
Yeah.
chakra. It's instrumental in opening up that throat chakra and being able to tell your truth without any outside ridicule. You get to tell your story just how it was, just how it happened. It doesn't matter what it looked like to someone else. That's your story, and you get to write it there. You
Yeah.
also get to write your healing in there. What makes you happy, what brings you joy.
Mm-hmm.
And more recently, I've found myself writing more about things that make me happy.
Mm-hmm.
Things that are instrumental in moving me forward versus keeping me in that area of reoccurring trauma, because that was a problem for me in the beginning. I couldn't understand why I was feeling so heavy, because I was reliving my trauma, because that's all I would write about. I would write about how bad I was feeling. But it wasn't until I got around a group of beautiful women that taught me the art of identifying the problem, but also writing out your solution, saying, okay, this is how I'm feeling. This is why I'm feeling that way. But what can I do to make sure that I don't continue feeling that way?
Yeah.
And that is how I've used that. Yoga.
Mm.
I started yoga and I thought it was honestly it was boring to me. And
You said
it
it was
was
boring to you?
it
Did I
was
hear that
boring
right?
to me.
Okay,
I'm
okay.
like, why am I doing this? Even it wasn't until, like I said, I started getting into Reiki and I got reintroduced to it. I was doing yoga at Fayetteville State, and I didn't really like it. It was cool. It was something cool. And good to do with your girlfriends. Some of my line sisters, every now and then, I
Mm-hmm.
would do different things. But it wasn't until about a year ago when COVID hit,
Okay.
and I was kind of lost, still trying to put that anchor, you know, completely in the ground.
Mm-hmm.
And I was, like everybody else, trying to find something to do with myself. I was in the middle of my master's program, and I was completely drowning in emotions, in my career. Everything was completely overwhelming, and I didn't know why.
Mm.
And I was surfing Instagram, and I saw this scholarship for black and for black people
Mm-hmm.
that this company was offering. And so I was like, I'm probably not going to get into that. And I started talking to a group of women that I met online who were also focusing on healing.
Okay.
And the topic of this scholarship popped up. And about three or four people had said they enrolled in it, and I actually thought it was a fee associated with it. So I was like, I'm not gonna pay no fee because, as you know, most training programs for yoga instructors are thousands of dollars,
Yes, it is very expensive.
usually, yeah, overseas, and I
Mm-hmm.
just wasn't about that life
Mm-hmm.
until they told me it was completely free, and they were like, "Girl, you better jump on that." So my friend, she actually sent me the link. And I remember sitting there, much like Reiki, like I'm not gonna get into this. Like I'm telling you, I was, like I said, I was drowning. I
Mm-hmm.
was showing people the light, but I did not have the light myself. I had clients. I was doing Reiki. I was canceling appointments because, as you know, Rule 101 as a Reiki master, you do not perform Reiki when you're not your best.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
I was fasting, and I was doing all these things, and I would get my energy back up, and on my good days I would say, okay, let me at least see two clients, and I was seeing clients, and then I would cancel for like a whole 2 weeks.
Mm.
So I remember signing up for this program, and immediately I got an email back, and it said, okay, you're in. And I was sitting there in disbelief, like, oh my God, like,
This
okay.
is about to happen.
Yeah. And I sat on it for 2 months. And finally one day I was I think I was in this room. I'm actually in my yoga room.
Mm-hmm.
And something said, just pop open the manual. And the first page was about compassionate self forgiveness.
Wow. Wow. When the student is ready, the teacher will appear. Wow.
And when I looked at that thing and I started going through the tutorials and started, attending the live webinars
Mm-hmm.
and the interactive classes, I started doing the free um, yoga classes that they had in the morning. But I just couldn't. I wasn't moving in the program, and I didn't understand why. I think I did that exercise for at least 6 months because it's been 2 years since I've been in the program.
Mm-hmm.
And it took me 6 months to get past just that first
The
phase.
first phase. What do you think the block was? What was that block?
Self denial,
Mm.
self denial. And I
Still
think it's
some
something,
some residual kind of
yeah.
trauma energy for sure.
It was this piece. It was just not wanting to acknowledge the fullness of my needing to heal. And I think in some of our earlier conversations, I used the word for pseudo healing.
Mm-hmm.
You heal just enough to say that, you're on the walk, but not enough to get down to the root of the problem.
Mm-hmm.
And I was dressing it up, I was putting Reiki on top of it, I was putting conversations like these on top of it, but I wasn't really getting to the root of the problem.
Mm-hmm.
And what I realized in that moment and I remember calling my mentor, my yoga mentor, and I think for 2 hours I just sat on a live Zoom and I just cried.
Wow. But you
And
probably needed that release.
she just sat there and she let me do it. And when I got done, she said, "You feel better?" And I said, "Yeah." She said, "Do you want to talk about it?" And in that moment, the reason why I cried is because one of the questions was, "What did you get out of this exercise?"
Mm.
And that in that moment, I realized that I had never experienced love.
Mm. Mm.
And yeah, and that was a hard pill to swallow.
Yeah.
Being a wife, being a mom, being a holistic practitioner, and in that moment, I realized that I didn't love myself,
Mm.
not completely, not unconditionally. And
Mm-hmm.
when I realized that, it was like, oh my gosh, what have I been projecting to my patients, to my family, but most importantly to myself? Like, what are you doing? And it was in that moment that true healing started for me. Because
Mm.
when I was aware of it, now I can, now I finally saw what my business mentor saw, what so many of my friends that said they were friends saw, that
That
couldn't
professor.
handle, yeah, that couldn't
Mm-hmm.
handle, the depth of my needing to heal. It just wasn't, they served their time, but I finally saw myself the way that everybody else saw me, and it was terrifying.
Mm-hmm.
And so I began to use yoga and Reiki and journaling because those were all elements of my yoga instructor training.
And isn't it something that journaling, and I love the way that you described how you have incorporated that, and how you allowed it to shift, your focus from what happened to what is good that is happening. But I wanted to point out that journaling is one of the most amazing, most enlightening modalities that we have at our immediate disposal, but it's underused. Like I can't even tell you how much I'm, talking to clients on a daily basis, and one of the, accountability pieces of the coaching process is to journal, and reminding them and almost pleading with them to journal, because there's just so much insight and so much healing that can come from it. But I think it is, you're touching on something there that I think maybe I need to bring to their awareness, is that process doesn't have to be all about what's wrong and what isn't right and what makes you feel bad, and perhaps that is why they're not really connecting with it. So thank you for that, because I think that's something that I need to bring to their awareness, that hey, this doesn't have to be all about what hurts. This can be something, that can help you to, build yourself and help you to feel, inspired. um, I do the journaling prompts in the Healing Everyday group every Thursday, and being very intentional about trying to make sure that those prompts are something that help people to not just see themselves, but see themselves better, see themselves healed. In fact, I think the prompt that was yesterday, I want to say it had something to do with, to consider whatever your problem is, and begin to journal on how, seeing that piece of yourself being fully healed, being fully restored and all right. So I love that you shared that. Thank you so much for that. I wanted to just ask if there is any final piece, any final advice, any words that you have for the viewers.
The biggest part of healing for me, when I totally understood what that meant, is first the awareness. Then, after the awareness, becomes the acknowledgement. Once you acknowledge, then you can begin your process. But you have to be willing to go through the process. It
Mm-hmm.
starts with the willingness because it's all about transformation. Healing is transformation. And the true definition of healing to me is realizing that in acknowledging that you need to heal is that while you're feeling all of those emotions and going through the process of living through those emotions to heal from that is that don't expect to be the individual that you were at the time you experienced the trauma because you're
Mm-hmm.
no longer that person. You're revisiting that trauma to make peace and go back to collect yourself, to bring yourself to your present in creating wholeness.
Mm.
And I think that's so important, in correlating that with your business. And just because a trauma happened, there's still wholeness,
Yes.
there's still wellness.
I tell
And
people
I
all the
think,
time, you can
yeah,
still be whole on the other side of
yeah,
sexual assault. You can.
yeah.
Absolutely.
So to me, that's what healing truly is. It's recognizing that there was indeed a trauma and that it happened, and it's okay to be hurt. It's okay to feel those emotions. But in part of healing and moving forward, in forward movement, which is what we're about,
Mm-hmm.
is in acknowledging that you are no longer that person. Yes, you have to meet with that person. You have to look at that individual. You have to go, like we say, what do we call it? Shadow work, revisiting your childhood. Because as, you know, mental health backgrounds that we share, we know that the baseline of that, not all, but the majority of trauma is shaped in your early childhood. It is shaped in your early family practices and communities. And
Mm.
for that, you have to meet that younger version of yourself
Yeah.
to heal that version of yourself, to bring that version of yourself forward and saying it's okay to move past that.
Mhm.
And in that is a quote that I'd like to read,
Yes,
um,
please.
which which I talk about, and it's what my business is about, which is divine self love. Divine self love requires consistent self empowerment with the implementation of mindfulness of the whole self that uplifts your vibrations, transforms your mindset, and reshapes your life to walk in your authentic purpose. And essentially, healing is about being authentically yourself, being who you
Hmm.
truly are, and
I
living that.
love I love the mindfulness of your whole self. Your whole self. It is, look, that whole mind, body, spirit, there's something to it. There is truly, truly something to it. And I'm in full agreement with you that if we are not aware of our whole self, there's always going to feel like there's something missing.
Absolutely.
I said earlier here today that I was in therapy for a long time, but there was something that was missing, and it was that body component. It was that spiritual component that was missing in the process. But once we grab a hold of that, that is when that transformation takes place.
Absolutely.
I love it. I love it. What's next for Divine Star Essentials? What's to come? What can people expect from you now?
Well, right now, Divine Star is kind of going through a reconstruction. So I would say in the near future, we'll be dropping a website. Right now, you can reach me on my social media platforms, Divine Star Essentials LLC. is my Instagram, also my Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and like I said, probably around fall, maybe spring 22,
Mm-hmm.
I'll be dropping my website and rolling out some new things. But for now, you can log on to those any of those platforms and just take a look at some of the previous holistic wellness tips and modalities that I've rolled out and see how you like it. We'd be happy to have you.
I dig, I dig, I dig. So, of course, everyone who is watching, of course, I'm going to make sure to have all of Gina's contact information in the description. So, if you are wanting to connect with her, you can absolutely do so there. Um, Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me again.
Thank you so much for being here. This, I couldn't even imagine a better reboot guest to have had. This has been not just an inspiring conversation, but if, in all honesty, Gina, it has been an educational conversation. You have really spit out some really good nuggets of wisdom that I know are going to be a blessing to anyone who takes time to listen. So thank you, thank you, thank you so very much for this today. Do you have any events or anything like that that are coming up that you want to bring to people's awareness?
Not just
Anything?
not just yet.
Okay.
Right now we're just kind of like I said, reconstructing, rebooting,
Oh,
and you can just follow my social media to be up to date. And once I launch my website, you'll be able to subscribe and keep up to date with what we have coming. But right now, Divine Star doesn't have anything, currently going. So I said, look, probably about fall, maybe spring, early spring.
okay. Well, I'm excited. I'm going to be looking forward to some Reiki healings. I'll be looking forward to some yoga classes. I know it's about to go down in full bloom. Thank you again so much, dear heart, for taking this time. I really greatly appreciate it. For those of you who want to connect with myself and Still Whole Wellness, you guys are more than welcome to visit www.stillwholewellness.com. You can also reach me on my social media platforms, on Facebook at Still Whole Wellness. You can also reach me on Instagram at still_whole_wellness. And thank you guys so much for viewing the channel today. And I hope that you continue to be blessed by everything that is presented here. Know that I love you on purpose, and remember to follow this channel because this is where healing happens every single day. You guys be well and at peace, and we out.